Hello BookTube, welcome to the Literary Buffet. My name is Louis, and today I thought I'll do a wrap-up of my reading in 2025, so kind of like a top 10 of my reads in 2025 with copious honorable mentions. I thought I'd do this already now. I know it's the 1st of December, there's still 1 month to go, but I won't be able to do videos in the coming few days. And anyway, I kind of like count the books I read in the Christmas season, which is a time when I have a bit more time to read, as kind of like books that already fit into the next year. So without further ado, let's start. My top 10 fiction books, in no particular order apart from the last one, the number one. So let's start with this one here. Orhan Pamuk's My Name is Red. Fantastic historical novel that takes place during the heyday of the Ottoman Empire. There's a crime happening amongst the miniaturists, so the court painters of the Sultan, and basically there's a crime story solving this murder that happened. But beyond that is a reflection about East versus West, about the soul of Turkey, actually, and just as relevant in the times of the Ottoman Empire when this takes place, as well as in modern day Turkey and more generally in the modern world. So huge recommend for this one. I did a little review of it, so I'll link to it below. Then something completely different, also a historical novel actually, but a very different vibe. So this is The Dwarf by Per Lagerkvist, a Swedish author. It was written, I think, just after the Second World War. It's a very, very depressing, very nihilistic type of work. It follows the main character, the dwarf, which is basically, I mean, if it isn't the inspiration for Tyrion Lannister, I don't know what, because it's kind of like Tyrion Lannister from, famously Game of Thrones, and the whole series by J.R.R. Martin. But this dwarf here is even more negative, even more cynical than Tyrion Lannister. So if you like Tyrion Lannister in the Game of Thrones series, then you might like this one. Next is Orbital by Samantha Harvey. So it won the Booker Prize in, when was it? 2024, so last year. I read it this year. It's a short thing. I'm surprised it's called a novel, because it's almost more of a poem. It's very lyrical. There's nothing really happening. So this is the kind of book that you really read for the language. It's gorgeous. It's very beautiful. Follows one day in the life of astronauts that are kind of like circling the Earth. But because of how this basically works in space, they're not circling the Earth once. They're circling it like a dozen times. I don't recall exactly. And you just have this feeling of constantly tumbling, to Earth, but you're kind of like tumbling forward and just seeing the same parts of Earth again and again. And it's a very, very bizarre but very interesting effect that Samantha Harvey manages to create with Orbital. Again, mentally, I've almost classified it for myself as almost like a prose poem or something like that, because there's really nothing happening. But if you like that kind of book, I really recommend Orbital. Then a bit in the same vein, in the sense that it's the prose that really makes this book. This is Raduan Nassar, Labora Arcaica, that's the Portuguese name. I'll have to look up the English name. Raduan Nassar is a Brazilian author. So he actually only wrote 2 books, 2 novels and like a few short stories, and then he decided he didn't want to write anymore and became a farmer, apparently, which is a pity, because his prose in Portuguese, at least, is absolutely gorgeous. It's one of the most lyrical books I've read in Portuguese. So definitely recommend reading Radwan Nassar. So the story is kind of like a take on the prodigal son. It's about a farming family somewhere in Brazil, and the son that disappears into the city and is basically, convinced to come back. Um, and you have the story about why the son did decide to leave the family, why he decides to come back, what happens when he comes back, and it's all very biblical, very infused with meditations about time, and about family, and so on. So I think, if I recall correctly, I think the English title, now it comes back to me, something like Ancient Tillage, but I'll look it up and I'll put it in the description. Then book that I actually read. I hadn't read it before, but I read it because there was this read along and read aloud on several channels of Dracula, several booktube channels, and I really loved it. So if you haven't read Dracula yet, I won't spend too much time. I think everybody knows what it's about. Read Dracula. It's fantastic. Really worth it. I loved it. Then another classic. So I think the next two are classics. This one is from French literature. It's Émile Zola's Germinal in French, which is his most celebrated work. He wrote like a whole sequence of novels called Les Rougon-Macquart. So it follows like the extended family of the Rougon-Macquart, and that allows him to really dip into different bits of the French society. He actually invented this genre of naturalist writing, as he called it. I think some have called it. But Germinal is considered his masterpiece, and it's really fantastic. Takes place in the coal mines of northern France, and it follows really the day-to-day life of these coal miners that are then pushed to do a strike. And at the same time, you also follow kind of like the bourgeoisie that actually owns the mines, and then how they deal with it. What basically ensues after this coal mining strike. It's there's very vivid descriptions of the coal mines. It's really very well done, but also of the lives of these miners and the poverty. But it goes beyond just being like a tableau of their lives. It's, you really follow the characters. You get to really love them and be enthused about their struggle to get higher loans. But yeah, so it's a kind of book that in France or in French-speaking countries you tend to read in schools. So people kind of like hate it a little bit because it's one of those school reads that either you're forced to read or you're happy you weren't forced to read. I didn't have to read it at school, so I just got to it this year, and it's really a pity that you're forced to read it because it's really good. In general, Émile Zola is quite good. So we did read one of his books in school, which was Thérèse Raquin, and I quite liked it at the time. So I like him much more than Balzac and then some of the other 19th century French authors. So I might go back to Zola for some other of his novels. Then we go to like a mega classic, and that's Dante's Divine Comedy. So this is a French translation in the gorgeous Pléiade books. So I like this little cover for the leather binding. The paper is kind of like Bible sized. It's a bilingual edition, so you have the Italian and the French translation, and you have copious notes, which you need to read the Divine Comedy, just because there's so many allusions to things, to biblical stories, to the contemporary cities, contemporary history, of Dante, so the various noblemen that were powerful, or popes, and especially popes. Is very critical of some of the popes that lived during his timeline. The Divine Comedy is, I mean, it's just a gorgeous work. I think you do have to read it completely. So I know mostly nowadays it's kind of like split up, and then everybody just reads the Inferno just for the descriptions of, you know, the tortures that are inflicted upon the sinners. But actually, I think the whole work is only complete if you read all of it, because the whole thing is a progression of Dante, aided by Virgil for the first two books, and then by Beatrice, his kind of like idealized love, for the last one, for Paradise. And the whole thing is kind of like a progression. And if you miss the last two books, you're missing the culmination of that progression. You just got like the part in hell. And even though like the part in hell is kind of like the most graphic and the most fantastical almost, I would say that probably my favorite book ended up being Purgatory, which also has some of those elements, but kind of like has more of this progression towards an idealized goal. Paradise is very weird, so you have to kind of like, if you're an atheist or someone who is not believing, you have to kind of like try to put yourself in the minds of a very believing Christian person in the Middle Ages to really follow Dante along. Also, the one thing I would say is sometimes you do have to struggle on a little bit, especially the first few cantos of each of the three parts, so of Hell, of Purgatory, and of the Paradise, are a little bit tedious, at least they were to me, but then it kind of like picks up and becomes quite gorgeous again. And it's quite amazing how Dante manages to just become more and more ecstatic as as the work culminates in the last of heavens, just because it's already in parts very ecstatic in between. So, but he manages, and it's a great work. So it's one of those deservedly canonical works of global literature. Then, sticking with Italian literature, it's something contemporary. This is M, Son of the Century by Antonio Scurati. This is the first volume of a whole series that follows the life of Benito Mussolini. So here you have the part between the end of the First World War and Mussolini's seizure of power. And it's extremely well done. It's you're following not just Mussolini, but also some of his contemporaries, really in their heads. And I mean, it's just a fantastically done historical novel. Scurati also inserts after each chapter like little vignettes from newspapers from the time. So you actually see that he really he's not imagining too much. Well, it's a novelization, so obviously he's imagining what went on in Mussolini's head, etc. But it's kind of like punctuated by all of these snippets from newspapers from the time that put the same action in another light. So it's really well done. So this is the German translation, and it's absolutely enormous. I think the English translation is a bit smaller. I have the next 3 volumes as well, so probably read the next one next year, and then let's see how I progress. Then the 9th one is another one that I did a little review on recently. It's Shadow Ticket by Thomas Pynchon. It's probably Thomas Pynchon's final novel. I quite enjoyed it, and I'll refer to my actual review of it. I mean, it's Pynchon, it's zany, it's crazy, but yeah, a good read. And before I come to the best read, so I have a few honorable mentions that are mostly nonfiction or like other types of things, and I didn't really want to give away a spot in the top 10 for them. I'll actually start with one that is fiction, but that I haven't finished yet, so that's why I can't really put it in the top 10 of my reads of 2025. But that's Mason and Dixon by Thomas Pynchon, which I hadn't read yet, and it's one of the books that's considered his masterpiece, together with Gravity's Rainbow. Gravity's Rainbow is, of course, the more famous one. I'm almost done. I kind of like 100 pages. I have 100 pages to go, and I'm loving it. It's a fantastical book. So when I'm done, I might do a review video of it. Then a few completely different books. First of all, a short story. So I didn't want to give a whole spot to a short story, but this is from the Penguin Books of Korean short stories, and is one that was recommended also on a BookTube channel. And it's by Cho Chong-nae, Land of Exile. And it's a short story about the Korean War, so between North Korea and South Korea, and a person that took an active part in the Korean War, and then has to live with the consequences of his actions during the Korean War. Very harrowing. Maybe one of the most harrowing short stories I've read. So really something I can recommend. I haven't read the other short stories in this Penguin Book of Korean short stories, so that's why I'm not recommending the whole thing. But that one I definitely recommend. It's quite amazing. Then a book that I'm not actually sure I'm recommending. I think it's the most perplexing book that I read this year, just because I didn't really know what to make of it. And that's Autobiography of Red by Anne Carson, so the Canadian poet. It's supposedly, well, it's not quite a retelling of a fragment of Greek myth, where we don't only have like little bits and pieces left. And Anne Carson just takes those little bits and pieces to come up with her own story about Geryon. So Geryon is a monster in this ancient myth, but in Anne Carson's retelling, he becomes kind of like a boy who has some monstrous features, but also sometimes not, and we just follow his life basically. So very weird. So I didn't really know what to make of it. Also guess that I didn't really know what to make of her poetry style, which is kind of like a very prose-like poetry style. So this is just what it looks like. But yeah, definitely a book of 2025 that will stay with me. Then my favorite drama or play that I read this year. So again, these are quite short, so I didn't really want to put it as top 10, but it's definitely one I really enjoyed. It's Peter Sheffer's Equus, about a boy who's taken to an asylum, and after he has actually committed a crime where he has blinded several horses, and then you kind of like investigate why he did that. You have the psychiatrist that tries to get the information out of the boy and out of the parents, just to understand why did he actually get so fascinated with horses. An unhealthy fascination, of course, and why did he commit the deed in the end? So very, very harrowing again, but yeah, quite a nice play. Should probably watch an actual performance of it someday. Then my another book that I've shown already on other videos, but my favorite history book this year was The Deluge by Adam Tooze, an analysis of the economics of the end of the First World War, and how it basically entangled America, France, and the UK, and Germany into a web of debt, where basically, so Germany was owing debt to France and Britain under the Versailles Treaty, but France and Britain were owing that to America as part of having been financed by the US during the First World War. And at the same time, the Americans also later on then financing German businesses and then the German government itself. And you just had like this web of debt, which led to basically the economic disasters of the 1920s. And then later on, basically led to the downfall of the Weimar Republic in Germany. Then two more nonfiction books, quite slim ones, but also quite, I wouldn't say strange ones, but quite specific ones. This one here is by Ngugi wa Thiong'o, The Language of Languages, which is a collection of his essays on translation. So Ngugi wa Thiong'o is or was, I think he might have died recently. So Ngugi wa Thiong'o is quite famous for having, during his writing career, switched from English, as many African writers, many African writers tend to write in languages of Europe, so English, French, or Portuguese, depending on who was their colonial overmaster in the past. But Ngugi wa Thiong'o switched to actually writing in his native Kikuyu at some point, so it's a language from Kenya. And this is a collection of essays on why he did that, why he believes that African authors should write in African languages. So very interesting from that perspective. And then last but not least of the honorable mentions, also something very weird is Consorts of the Caliphs by Ibn al-Sa'i, which is a book from the wonderful Library of Arabic Literature, hope you can see it, which is a collection of translated Arabic literature by the New York University Press. And so this is a kind of like a set of little biographies. So you can see like, kind of like just a couple of pages long usually, about the consorts of the caliphs of the Abbasid court. So the Abbasid Caliphate was the second big caliphate in Arabic history, and it was based in Baghdad. So Baghdad was the capital of the Abbasids. And this is towards the end of the Abbasid Empire, if you want to call it that, just before they lose to the Mongols, who kind of like devastate the whole of, they devastate Baghdad first of all, and then they also lead to the crumbling of the Abbasid Caliphate. And Ibn al-Sahi, he lived during that time. He did write several of these kind of essays and chronicles, etc. One was apparently on the lives of the wives of the caliphs, so the official wives. That one is apparently lost, but the one that we have is his lives of the consorts of the caliphs. And it's quite interesting just because it gives you a look into the court of the Abbasid Caliphate, of these women, what they did. Some of them were poetesses, and so you have some of their poems also mentioned, or they come across actually as very cultured women that played an important role in the culture of the caliphate. But later on, you also have some of these consorts that engage in large building projects in Baghdad. So you also have those, or in charity. So it just gives you this view of the court of the caliphs just before they crumbled, basically. The book is very nicely done. So you have actually like little maps in it. So you have like a map of the caliphate, or the areas of the caliphate. You have a map of Baghdad, Then you have 2 other maps of Baghdad, because basically the city did change over the centuries. So you can actually follow, where these things took place. Like when they mention a certain palace, you can look at the map where this palace was in Baghdad. So very well done. It has like a vast introduction that's actually very good to place this work. It's not your typical read. It's also not the typical type of thing that's written nowadays. But I find it quite fascinating because it gives you also a view of what people in the past would actually read and be interested in writing. So things that we may not read or write anymore. So now back to the top 10 list. So my favorite book, so this is the only one that is ranked in this whole list of top 10 novels or fiction and honorable mentions. And that's Moby Dick by Herman Melville. It's just fantastic. I don't think I need to sing the praises of Moby Dick. Everybody sings the praises of Moby Dick. What I would say is that it's probably less well known in Europe than it is in America. I think in America it's kind of like a staple of school reading. I mean, here, we know it exists, but it's not really the kind of thing that's on the radar of most people, even when looking at classics. But so I'm happy that I was convinced by numerous booktubers to actually finally read it. Yeah, it's just gorgeous. The prose is amazing. Yes, you have all of those chapters about whaling and the history of the whale and the parts of the whale, etc. But what I would say is that just go along with it. You don't need to remember like what all the parts of the whale are and what the blubber is and etc. etc. Just go along with it, because what Melville is doing is just creating like a whole edifice. Like he's making whaling into this whole universe, and it's basically setting the scene for the final chapters of Moby Dick. It's really, yeah, I think there's nothing more I need to add. If you haven't read Moby Dick yet, absolutely read it. It's just phenomenal. It's fantastic. Don't mind the whaling chapters. Just skim through them if you don't like it. But enjoy the prose of all the other chapters and also the whaling chapters. So that's it for my quick top reads of 2025 video. Hope you also had a great reading year. Well, I look forward to seeing what your top 10 reads were, or top how many ever you want to mention reads, as well as the other thing I guess will be coming up soon, what your TBR for 2026 is. So thanks a lot for listening, and goodbye, BookTube.